afternoon, good morning, whenever you're viewing this, might even be good night. Welcome to another day of Miss Simon's Biology Classroom. So our topic for today is going to be ecosystem stability and climate change, which is essentially what makes the ecosystem stable or unstable. So a recap from last lesson. So a bunch of people were telling me that last lesson was a bit confusing. So let's go ahead and recap some of the main ideas. So what you do need to know about the carbon cycle is that excess CO2 emissions are bad. They're not good for the environment because they end up trapping heat on Earth. Photosynthesizing plants and bacteria are going to help reduce excess CO2 in the atmosphere because to do photosynthesis, they have to take in carbon dioxide. For the nitrogen cycle, the main things you need to know is that nitrogen-fixing bacteria live in the plant roots. That's a process of symbiosis. And you also need to know that fertilizer runoff causes algal blooms and what are known as dead zones, and we'll talk about those some more today. So photosynthesis, as a little recap, hopefully for everyone. So this is a plant, right? And we know that plants take in sunlight. They also take in CO2, we learned that. And they take in water. What they give off oxygen so that you and I can breathe, and they also make plant sugars. You can also think of it like this. Here is a plant. You see its feet is in the water. You see the sunlight, and there's a little blow dryer with some air in it. That's CO2, and the plant is giving off oxygen and glucose sugars. So plants take in CO2 and they give off oxygen. Okay? Another thing about cellular respiration, so we're gonna have like more in depth about cellular respiration, but for now what you need to know is that photosynthesis takes CO2 from the air, right? Only autotrophs are gonna do photosynthesis, while cellular respiration, all living things do cellular respiration, and a product of cellular respiration is CO2. So during the daytime, plants give off oxygen, and at the nighttime, they give off CO2, so they are both a carbon source and a carbon sink. Okay, let's do a quick check for understanding. The nitrogen cycle is dependent upon which of these? Okay, if you said the ability of some bacteria to trap nitrogen from the air, you are correct. That's that nitrogen-fixing bacteria. They live in plant roots, and they give plants ammonia, and they get a free place to stay. So they're both being benefited. It's mutualism symbiotic relationship. If any of that was confusing to you, you really, honestly and truly need to rewatch videos or re-look over notes and things like that. Our test is coming up, and I can't sit there and have you study for your test. You have to do it on your own time. I have all the materials there for you, and I'm always there if you have questions, but I can't stress enough how important it is for you to actually look over this material again. That's why I post all of my videos again, and I also post all of my notes again, so you can have them to study, but you also should be taking your own notes at home. Okay, the people who are doing really well in this class are people who have their own little notebook that they're writing things down in or drawing pictures and trying to like make sense of it themselves. So ecosystem stability is the capability of an ecosystem to remain constant, right? Despite all the changes that might be going on. Right? An ecosystem is never really staying the exact same, like we said. It's going to have lots of different factors that are coming in, such as new species are coming, or maybe species are dying off. There could be way more species now than there were before. Population sizes could be really big. There could be different interactions. The weather could be different, right? Those all change the ecosystem. But a stable ecosystem is supposed to resist those changes. An unstable ecosystem is going to fall apart because of those changes. And we'll look at some examples. Okay, so constant just means keep it the same. So how do you know if an ecosystem is stable or unstable? Well, a stable ecosystem is going to have high biodiversity, so there's lots of different organisms. It's going to be resistant to change. Like I said, even though there are all these changes going on, the ecosystem isn't just going to fall apart if it's stable. Okay, there should be very little to no toxins or diseases, and every predator should have enough prey to eat. That's a stable ecosystem. So essentially, it's an ecosystem in which you and I would like to live, somewhere that would be a nice place to live. while an unstable ecosystem is going to be the opposite of that. Things are dying or getting sick very quickly. There's low energy available, and organisms could even be migrating or leaving. This is leading to a low biodiversity, okay? Low diversity. So let's look at these two pictures of what a stable ecosystem and an unstable ecosystem looks like. So which of these would you like to live in? A stable or unstable, and why? Right, most people are going to say live in the stable ecosystem because as you can see, there's lots of greenery. The sky is bright blue. There's birds, there's deer, there's bunnies, there's fish in the water. Everything looks really healthy and happy. While an unstable ecosystem is going to have possibly buildings, evidence of human activity. These trees are like compare these two trees. This one looks like it's dead or dying. There are no fish in the water. There's way fewer animals out and about. So an unstable ecosystem is going to be one that is damaged in some way. Okay? So the main things that you probably should know for stable ecosystem is that predators should have enough prey to eat and there's a high biodiversity. While an unstable ecosystem is when organisms are migrating or leaving and there's very low biodiversity. Changes that negatively impact ecosystems. So let's look at what some changes that can make ecosystems unstable. Deforestation is going to reduce the number of photosynthesizers. How is that destabilizing? Well, like we just said, when plants do photosynthesis, they're taking in CO2 and they're taking in water. Okay, when they do that, then they are going to give off oxygen, which is good for us. So they're going to take all that nasty CO2 and turn it into something useful and nice for us to breathe, right? However, if we go around chopping down all the trees, killing all the trees, and they're not taking in all that CO2, right? They're not doing all that photosynthesis, which means there's going to be lots of nasty CO2 floating around in the atmosphere. And that nasty CO2 is what leads to global warming because it traps heat inside of the globe instead of letting it escape, okay? Fertilizer runoff. So look in this picture right here. You can see lots of algae. That's called an algal bloom, right? So whenever there's a fertilizer or some sort of chemical, it could even be sewage, can run off, which just means that it gets into the water system, then it's going to cause what's called an algal bloom. An algal bloom is going to cause a dead zone to occur. And a dead zone is exactly what it sounds like. There's very low oxygen. And as we know, organisms need to breathe oxygen, or a mean ecosystem organism like a fish or something is going to need the oxygen to run over its gills. It's their version of breathing. They don't breathe like you and I, but they breathe as they swim, right? So a dead zone is exactly what it sounds like. Animals are dying because there's very little oxygen there. And that's typically due to fertilizer or sewage runoff. Excess CO2 emissions are going to lead to global warming because excess CO2 in the air is going to trap heat and make Earth warmer, right? Cars, airplanes, deforestation, the oil and gas industry, chemical plants, all of these are going to produce a lot of CO2. And like we said, if we're producing all this CO2, right, it's going to get trapped here on Earth, and that's going to make the Earth hotter and hotter and hotter over time. And like we learned, what was it, last lecture, we learned that there were natural heating and cooling cycles on Earth, but we are making it go way up, way too fast because of our cars and airplanes and deforestation and oil and gas industry. Overfishing and overhunting. So as humans, if we overfish and overhunt, then we're removing key organisms from food webs. And as we learned in our food web lessons, we learned that just removing even just one organism can collapse the whole thing, as you can see here. If you remove one organism, then suddenly the organism that normally eats that can't eat. It's going to die off. And then whatever organism normally eats that organism can't eat, that one will die off as well, and it'll just be a domino effect, okay? So I can destroy the food web. Overfishing and overhunting. That's also why there are protected deer seasons. So like certain areas of the country and also certain times of the year, you cannot hunt certain organisms because they have to rebuild, right? Because if we just kill, then like I said, that domino effect is going to be seen and we'll have lots of problems because of it. Again, this is a recap. Invasive species, we've talked about this before. They have no natural predators, right? An invasive species would be like if a Martian, someone from Mars, came and jumped on Earth. They're an invader, right? They're an invasive species. They have no natural predators. They have no natural weaknesses. So that means their population can just grow. And that means that they may end up outcompeting the natives for important resources. And we know that resources are how we survive. So if this invasive species is coming in and knocking out the natives, then the invasive species is going to grow and take up resources. Well, the natives die off, and that's not good, because that also can lead to a domino effect, right? Extinction of a native species. So if a native species goes extinct, which just means that they're all killed, they're all died, like there's no more of them at all, they're extinct, then that can destroy the natural food web as well, right? Because again, that domino effect. So that domino effect, every organism is important. Even things that seem so small, like spiders or bumblebees or things like that, they're all very important because everything is connected in a very delicate balance. So if you take one of those pieces away, then all the ones can start to fall. Warming oceans and melting ice caps are bad. Why are they bad exactly? Like we all have heard that they're bad. Like the sea level is rising. Oh no, it's bad. Well, I'm going to tell you exactly why it's bad. Okay, so phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are these things that live in the ocean and they do photosynthesis. They like to live in the cold. They like for it to be cold. So if it's a cold ocean, then there's going to be more of those phytoplankton. That means that they're going to be doing photosynthesis more. And that means that if they're doing photosynthesis, they're taking in a whole bunch of CO2, right? If they're constantly doing photosynthesis, they're constantly taking in CO2. And that means it's leaving the air, right? It's getting put into them, which means less global warming. So warm oceans means that there's less phytoplankton. If there's less phytoplankton, they're not doing photosynthesis, they're not trapping that CO2, then we're having, lots of issues with that. So that's why warming oceans, it's part of the reason why warming oceans are not good, right? Because the phytoplankton don't like it to be warm. And we need phytoplankton to do photosynthesis so they can take that CO2 out of the air. Okay, let's look at the changes that positively impact ecosystems. So before I even change the slide, I want to know who remembers the term for rebuilding after a disaster. Good. If you said secession, you're good to go. Keep up the good work. If you did not know this word secession, that was an entire lecture video, virtual notebook, and exit ticket. So if you did not even know that word, you're behind, you need to study. Secession is the rebuilding of an ecosystem after a disaster, right? And we had two types of secession. We had primary and we had secondary. So primary secession is the one that starts off bare rock. Okay, our lichens and mosses, those pioneer species, remember that word pioneer species, are going to break down the rock over a very long time. Once they do that, then regrowth can begin. We also have what's called secondary secession, so soil still present. Remember, notice that I highlighted the S's, so you remember secondary secession is when soil is still present. And that means regrowth can begin almost immediately. Okay, so just to recap, primary secession is going to take a very long time because you have to break down bare rock into soil, and then soil goes to grasses, and then grasses go to bushes, and yada, yada, yada. Versus the secondary secession, there's already soil, there's probably still some grass even, and so regrowth can begin immediately. That's going to take a shorter amount of time. Okay? So like I said, the Unit 1 test is coming up, so make sure that you're reviewing the videos and the notes and taking class seriously. I've had a couple people who have reached out to me to let me know like what's going on in their homes, let them know, like ask me for help and advice. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And if you're not reaching out to me, I can't help you. So make sure that you are reaching out and you're letting me know what's going on, how you're feeling, so we can make the best decisions for you.